Hey everybody, welcome back to Ironman. We're glad you're here with us again this week. We are going to continue. In fact, today is the last day in our series on being fully committed, going through 1st and 2nd Kings. In the Old Testament, we are looking at the character, the king known as Jehu. Might be pronounced Yehu, but we're going to call him Jehu because I'm not sure. So Jehu is a guy that a lot of us can probably relate to in a lot of ways. Now, he was a king of Israel, and as we talked about last week, there was not considered one good king in all of Israel during this period of time. They were all considered evil, except for the 8 kings that were out of the kingdom of Judah that were considered good. Now, this guy got close. Jehu is somebody that we can relate to. He started out well. He started off with enthusiasm. He started off excited, and most of all, he was obedient to God. And you think, well, how can somebody who is obedient to God also be considered an evil king? And that's what we're going to kind of look at today. A lot of us start off well and we don't end our lives well, as we saw with King Solomon and others. But let's just take a look at who King Jehu was. He ruled in Israel for 28 years. He was the 10th king, and he was tasked with the job after the Battle of Mount Carmel between Elijah and Ahab, over who the true God was, between Baal and Jehovah. And then afterwards, we see that Jehu is tasked with killing all of Ahab's family. This was the job that he was given, and we're going to take a look at that. 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 15 through 17. Let's read this. I'm going to start kind of midway through it. It says, also, and this is God speaking to Elijah, also anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, king over Israel, and announce Elisha, son of Shaphat from Abel Maloah, to succeed you as prophet. Jehu will put to death anyone who escapes the sword of Hazael, and Elisha will put to death any who escape the sword of Jehu. Now, back in these days, these guys were hardcore. They did not mess around. When he said he wanted to kill off Ahab's family, this is exactly what God intended to happen. So God gave Elijah specific instructions to completely dismantle all of King Ahab's reign, which would include his family and everybody. So Jehu was the commander of Israel's army, and he's now recently been anointed king over Israel. So he's the right guy to do this job. But he was also known for destroying all of the temples and all of the prophets of Baal, which at that point in history was a big deal. And I looked up yesterday online images of the temples of Baal, and they were huge. They weren't just like small, buildings. It was shocking to me that they were almost as big as like the temple that Solomon built. They may have even been bigger. So this idea of him destroying the temple wasn't a small task that he did. So I want to go back now and look at the story of when he was actually anointed by Elisha. So Elisha was given this task from Elijah. Elisha sort of passes the buck, or maybe it wasn't convenient for him to go anoint Jehu. So he sends one of his students, and he's told, go separate Jehu from the rest of his army and have this kind of quiet conversation with him and explain to him what his job is to bring divine judgment on Ahab and his family. And, oh, by the way, you're going to be the next king. And it says, as soon as he gave him this news, he took off running. He ran away. The messenger just took off. I don't know if he was worried that he was going to get killed by Jehu and his men. Maybe they didn't know who he was. He was scared. He just took off. So initially, when his men asked Jehu who that was, he said, it was just some crazy man, a madman. But then after they pushed him on it, he said, I was going to be the next king. So they all bought in. They all blew their trumpets and proclaimed Jehu as the next king. Well, shortly thereafter, Jehu gets down to business. He doesn't waste any time. And that's how it should be for us. When God gives us a task, when we know that we're clearly supposed to go do something, we should get down to it. So Jehu, it says, he's coming in, he's passing the palace where Jezebel, Ahab's wife, is lounging in the window apparently, and she's heckling him out the window, and he pulls up and basically on his horse yells for the eunuchs to just toss her out. go ahead, just shove her out the window. So they do. She comes tumbling down, probably lands on her, breaks her neck or whatever happens, and she's dead on the ground. I'm sure the eunuchs were quite pleased to do this. Having worked for Jezebel for a long time, this probably was something they were delighted to do. So, then it says that Jehu just kind of rode around on top of the body. I mean, like I said, it was hardcore. She was killed instantly, and later when he decided he was going to do a proper burial for her, only her skull and her hands and her feet remained. All the dogs had come through and any other animals or whatever and just cleaned it up, scavenged the body. And this was exactly what was predicted by Elijah at the time. So 2 Kings 10, at the beginning of the chapter, it records the fall of Ahab, his sons, his allies, his family, and Jehu destroyed all the prophets of Baal. It's all right there. But Jehu did not get rid of all of the idol worship. He left some other things in high places, they called it, where there was other golden calves and other things that people continue to worship. Again, we look at this and we're so kind of perplexed, like, why did he not just do everything? If he was going to get rid of the prophets of Baal and he was going to knock down the temple and he was going to get rid of Jezebel and all the family, why not just go one step further and get rid of all of it? But he didn't, and he fell short. But it says that in 2 Kings 10, it says, Jehu struck down all that remained in the house of Ahab and Jezebel, all the great men, his close friends, his priests, and left none of them remaining. So anybody who had any loyalty or any ties at all to Ahab were killed. And because of this obedience, it says that he was blessed. He was blessed by God. Jehu was blessed by God with 4 generations after him that would be king, that would sit as king on the throne. But instead of having sort of an endless succession of family, this was it. You were obedient, but you weren't completely obedient. And I wonder if God's like that with us today. Like, he knows that he wants to bless us. He wants us to be obedient to him. I wonder how many times we've cut ourselves short on blessings that were intended for us because we weren't fully obedient. Now, one of the other problems is that Jehu destroyed the family of Judah's king as well. So he got on a roll. He started killing everybody, it seemed like, around. So he obeyed some of the commands, but instead of just taking care of the king of Judah, he went ahead and killed all of his family and friends too. I want to read to you about that. So it says Jehu was in command, obviously, as king. He sent message to kill all of the royal princes of Ahab. So we discussed that a second ago. But then it says the next day, those guys piled 70 heads into 2 heaps outside the city gate. So again, gruesome, nasty stuff. We have a pile of 70 heads sitting on the ground outside the city gate, and these were all of Ahab's relatives. Then it says, then shortly thereafter, Jehu encountered 42 brothers of Ahaziah, and he went ahead, and they said that they were his brothers, and he went ahead and he killed them too. They were just visiting there. He was not instructed to do this. He continued this sort of bloody massacre that he was on. So, he later, and this is the last one, and this is really about all we know about Jehu in the Bible, are these 3 things. He ruled for 28 years, and all we know about him are some of these bloody stories. So he was in control of Samaria at the time. He'd killed the Samaritan king. He'd killed the king of Judah and all of his brothers. And he invites all of the worshipers of Baal to a big ceremony, acting like he's one of them. And he's got them all there. He traps them and he kills them. And he later turns the temple into a giant latrine, it says. Okay, so not only did they tear down the temple, but now it's just going to be used as a bathroom, so to speak. So other than Jehu's obedience and his doing what God said, he had some things that caused him to get into some trouble with God. So the destruction of the house of Ahab was good. It was obedient, but he took it one step too far. I want to read this from Hosea 1, chapter 4. It says, the Lord said to Hosea, call him Jezreel. Okay, this is where the massacre took place. Because I will soon punish the house of Jehu for the massacre at Jezreel, and I will put an end to the kingdom of Israel. So he does get punished for this. The kingdoms came to an end of the reign after 4 generations. 2 Kings 10:31 says, Jehu did not or was not careful to walk in the law of the Lord, the God of Israel, with all of his heart. He did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam, which made Israel sin. And that's what this whole series that we've been talking about has been about. Are you walking with God with all your heart? Okay, it says he did not. He did not depart from the sins of his fathers. So although he was obedient, there were still parts of his life that he held on to. There was parts of a sinful reign that he was prideful about. Now, God anoints and he chooses who he wants to. You may look at this and go, why did he pick somebody like this? Well, he knew that as a commander of an army, this was the kind of guy he needed at this moment. We look at, the disciples. We look at the fishermen. We look at the tent maker people, that the uneducated that Jesus used during his time, his friends and people he was pouring into. They weren't the kind of people that you would think would be natural leaders. But God has a way of looking at people and deciding who he can use to fulfill his purposes. He can anoint anybody he wants to. He can choose people that we wouldn't envision or admire, or that we would even look to in times of trouble. I know this, some people love our current president, some don't. Some liked our former president, some don't. You're either Republican or Democrat or somewhere in between or whatever. But I think we can all agree that none of them are perfect. None of them have been perfect. They've all made mistakes. And I think we can look and see that God has used each of our leaders in some way or another to fulfill his purposes. But we don't know exactly what that is. We might not know until we get to heaven. But we do know that God puts people on the throne or in office for particular reasons to fulfill his purposes. Now, we have to remember this too. The failure of earthly kings and the leadership of earthly rulers is just a reminder to us that God is ultimately in control. He is in charge, that men are going to fail you. They're going to let you down. Leaders, pastors, people that you put up on a pedestal don't necessarily need to be there on a pedestal. But we do that. We look at leaders like that, especially Christian leaders, and we expect them to act like Jesus, and sometimes they fail short. So God alone is just, and God alone is king, and let's keep that in mind, that he's got people ruling and in charge for a reason. Now, I want to just take a look at 2 more verses. Actually, let's do 3 verses here about obedience, because this is what this whole series kind of comes down to. If you're going to be fully committed to God, it means that you are walking with him and you are being obedient to him because you love him. Jeremiah 7:23 says, "Obey me, and I will be your God, and you will be my people. Walk in obedience to all I command you, that it may go well with you." I'm not sure about you, but I want things to go well with me. I want my days to go well. Psalm 128:1 very clearly says, "Blessed are those who fear the Lord, who walk in obedience to him." If you're walking in obedience to God, you're going to be blessed. That's a straight promise here from the book of Psalms. Okay, last one. It says, "And this is love, that we walk in obedience to his commands, as you have heard from the beginning. His command is that you walk in love." That comes from 2 John 1:6. So we are commanded, we are to be obedient to God by loving each other and by loving God. Jesus said all the commandments come down to these 2 things. Okay, love God and love other people. If we're going to be obedient to God and if we're going to be fully committed to God, okay, this is how we do it, by loving each other and by loving God and being obedient to him. Thanks, you guys. We'll see you next time.